Today what I'm proposing to do is continue on the currency foreign exchange market or currency risk management. What I have done is the same tutorial 3 presentation I have enhanced or enriched more. There are about 10 slides more because there are more facts to be discussed. And just one logistic information is that money market side or the treasury bill, treasury bond side will be discussed in the semester 2, beginning first week of May. Beginning first week of May. That is most probably starting from 4th of May. Starting from 4th of May, and that will be done by a special person. I'll be also online, but it will be done by Mr. Mangala Karunaratne, Chief Manager, Treasury Back Office at Ceylon Bank. So hopefully it will be a more lively discussion. So since most of the some of the slides will be repeated from yesterday, I expect each and every one of you to interrupt and ask questions. Okay, done? Right. So currency risk management. Yesterday we did foreign exchange market, but some slides are common because I developed the same presentation and enriched it more. This slide is also we discussed yesterday, but still to give you a glimpse of or a summary of what we discussed yesterday. Comparing Sri Lankan foreign exchange market and Australian foreign exchange market, because Australia is supposed to be more developed than Sri Lanka. But still the Sri Lankan Central Bank tend to follow the Australian market because there are more similarities between the two markets. Therefore, it is prudent for us to compare with Australia, the Sri Lankan market, and that also paves the way for us to think out of box and see what we can do more in Colombo or in Sri Lankan foreign exchange market. So yesterday what we discussed is that just to remind yourselves, like in the case of Australian market, deregulations started, but there were 3 phases in Sri Lankan deregulation. First one was a fixed exchange rate regime till 1977, and President J.R. Jayawardena came in to power in 1977, and effective 1978, I think he followed the more open market concept in managing the economy. And then the exchange rate market or currency market from fixed exchange rate regime changed to floating exchange rate, not floating, managed float, where the US dollar value of the rupee or value of the US dollar in terms of rupees was announced by the central bank on a daily basis, bid and offer. In the fixed exchange rate market until 77, it was an announcement of about 14 currencies of trade partners of Sri Lanka, and that was settled. That was changed by central bank only after about 3 months or 4 months lapse, when they thought that the trade volumes had changed significantly into various currencies, and then going by the international market value of the so-called foreign currencies, that needed change. So in those days, economy was not complex, small economy, all right. And even the world economy was not so complex. So therefore, currency value variation of currency value or change of currency value did not happen frequently. So therefore, fixed exchange rate regime was followed and up until 1977. So managed float, the crawling band or the bid and offer being announced daily by the central bank, we discussed yesterday, and this practice was followed till 21st January 2001. On 21st January 2001, central bank floated the rupee and stopped quoting the US dollar value in rupees every morning. That was necessitated by the circumstances as well, where the rupee was depreciating on a daily basis, and the central bank announcement was a signboard or a pictorial depiction of pictorial exhibition of the depreciation of the rupee because of the vast amount of imports and then small amount of exports. In other words, more outflow of foreign exchange than inflows. So naturally, rupee will depreciate local currency, and therefore the exporters or the recipients of foreign exchange in the hands of the individuals who was earning foreign exchange was lagging behind in selling the foreign exchange to the banks, through the banks to the economy, and then to go to the central bank foreign reserves. On the other hand, the exporters or spenders of foreign exchange rushed to book forward or buy the foreign exchange from their bankers, and they were leading. So leading and lagging, concept of leading and lagging, increased the pressure on the foreign reserves of the central bank. Now these days we are talking about the $4 billion reserve, but somewhere in late 90s and year 2000, the central bank reserves are supposed to be negative or in red because of this practice of leading and lagging. So after consultation with the market, central bank on the 21st of January floated the rupee. So these three phases are fixed exchange rate in 1977 up to, and then managed float from 78 to 2001, and 2001 onwards floated rupee. But still there are issues, especially the largest import, the crude oil imported by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, going to a couple of $100 million each month, is managed by the central bank with the help of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation's supply of information, and mostly it is covered by the Bank of Ceylon, and that is not shown to the market. However, the rupee is supposed to be floated. So we don't call it a managed float after 2001, but it is a floated rupee. However, there is some sort of maneuver or intervention by the central bank in the market to protect the rupee value in terms of foreign currency, or the foreign currency value in terms of rupees, to suit the economic condition of the market. And then the next dimension is that the capital account and current account transaction control, exchange control regulations. Yesterday we discussed that till 1994, current account transactions were also controlled, along with capital account transactions. Current account transactions are the import, export, and inward remittances, worker remittances, and then outward remittances for foreign travel and education purposes. All that is current account transactions. But when large amount of funds are to be repatriated to other countries or even brought into this country for foreign direct investments, the exchange control applied for those capital account transactions, capital account controls applied. So actually this control of foreign exchange or controlling of foreign exchange received and then paid out in economic theory works against the interest of the economic development. The central bank and the Ministry of Finance or so-called economists learned it in the hard way. Why I say that is that when there is capital account controls, particularly the capital account controls, the international investors will not bring in their investment to Sri Lanka, knowing that when they want to take their money out of the country, capital account controls apply. So therefore, it was a deterrent for foreign direct investment to come into the country. And learning that, the central bank tried to increase the foreign direct investments by way of introduction of certain schemes. First, I think you would remember there were account scheme called SIERA, Share Investment External Rupee Account, to promote foreign investment in the stock exchange. Share Investment External Rupee Account. When the foreign currency was brought into the country through a bank, the bank was asked to open Share Investment External Rupee Account for those investors in the stock exchange, foreigners who bring in the foreign currency. And then when the foreign currency brought in is converted rupees and left over in the SIERA account, they were permitted to be invested through a stockbroker in the stock exchange. And when the investor wanted to sell the stocks he bought, and after with the profit, capital gains, the money was allowed to be credited to the SIERA account, and then they were permitted to take the money out of the country, circumventing the capital account controls. That was the SIERA account, Share Investment External Rupee Account. So after that, there were several other types of accounts. And latest is that IIA, Inward Investment Accounts. Inward Investment Accounts. You would have known recently the central bank introduced a special deposit account, SDA, special deposit account for foreigners or Sri Lankans living overseas to bring in their foreign currency funds. And the procedure is that they have to open an IIA account, Inward Investment Account at a bank. And those money can go into a special deposit account in the foreign currency form itself. And for especially for US dollar deposits, 1 year they pay 6.5%, 6.5% interest on 1 year fixed deposit US dollar. I guess some of the banks pay 6% or 5% for rupee deposits. But for the US dollar under the special deposit account scheme, the money that he brought into the country through IIA accounts and to SDA, special deposit accounts, are paid 6.5%. And the records or the statistics are that till for the 3 months that account was in existence, Sri Lanka received about over $200 million to the SDA accounts through various banks. So these are the mechanisms to promote the inflow of foreign currency. So which means to take away the ill effect of capital account controls that are being in existence, preventing anyone to take out of large sums of money from the country, including those who brought into the foreign direct investment bought by the foreigners or investors to the country, was subject to the capital account controls. So central bank and the economists learned that in a hard way, and then they are in the way of they are progressing to release the controls as soon as they could. But however, when the other infrastructure and then other contributors to the attractions of foreign exchange, foreign direct investments are not so robust in Sri Lanka, central bank has to keep the guard to prevent the money outflow, foreign currency outflow from Sri Lanka, to safeguard the foreign reserves of the country. This slide also we discussed yesterday. The geographical location, we said that Sri Lankan geographical location is better than Australian location, but however, Sri Lankan markets are not developed so far to the extent of Australian markets. However, the last line I have added today, any other differences between Aussie and Sri Lankan markets? Can anyone suggest what are the significant loopholes? One is that what we just discussed, the capital account controls. In Australia, there is open market, there is no capital account controls. Anyone could take the foreign currency to any Australian market and then take them out when they need to be taken out. But in Sri Lanka, but still the capital account controls are in existence. So therefore, anyone bringing in foreign direct investment in large sums has to come through an approved system like SDA through inward investment accounts. One other factor is that the political situation, the vast insensitive or if we just call it in the form of the dirty politics that we see in Sri Lanka, is also a contributory factor, because foreign investors would like to come and invest in a market where politicians and policymakers are very transparent and very professional. As you know, several incidents happened in the very recent past as well, particularly with regard to the Colombo Port City complex. If we may highlight one or two issues, you remember the government that were in power until 2015 started the Colombo Port City project, and soon after, when the government changed in 2015, the new government stopped that project for a period of about more than 1 year, I think more than 15 months. And those investors who came in suffered heavy losses, and their plight of the investment was very wobbly or very uncertain. And finally, after 15 months time, the then government had to renegotiate with the so-called investors who came into the Colombo Port City, and they restarted with, they say, with some changes, but however, the commencement of Colombo Port City project was delayed. That 15 months delay dragged on about 2 years or more planned progress of the Colombo Port City. So that kind of environment will not attract foreign direct investments, will only can only be a deterrent to those foreign direct investors who come to, who look at Sri Lanka as an investment destination. One other aspect is that the infrastructure, transport. When an investor comes to Sri Lanka to see the investments, when they land at the Katunanak International Airport, unlike any other country with a sophisticated financial market, for them to travel to the Colombo financial marketplace, Colombo city or suburbs, they wouldn't, unless they hire a special taxi or a limousine. There is no public transport. There is no train service. There is no the cab services available. There are all. I guess some of you may have had experiences in using those airport taxis, which is a slap on the face of the investors who arrive in Sri Lanka to look at the location for investment. So this lack of infrastructure or transport facilities is also another big and huge problem. And prevalence of peace, time and again, had been also a problem in Sri Lanka, where terrorism or civil commotions or bomb blasts, like in the case of Easter Sunday attack, or prior to 2009, some of the bombs going on in various parts of the Colombo and the country. Those happens to be problematic issues for the difference between a market like Australia and Sri Lanka. But there are positive factors as well. In Sri Lankan market, the workforce, knowledgeable workforce and English-speaking workforce had been a plus factor. In other words, adaptable workforce have been a plus factor. Another factor that have been attractive is that the payment and settlement systems, thanks to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and some efforts by the government as well, the RTGS system, the SLIP system, the SEFT system, and the scriptless security settlement system, and the SLIP system, all had can be competing with any financial market in any other country that are competing with Sri Lanka. Of course, to say the least, the payment and settlement system in Sri Lanka is far more superior than what is prevalent in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, or any nearby country in the region, but maybe competing equally or in an equal status with the payment and settlement systems of Singapore, Hong Kong, Tokyo, London, and New York. So with these differences, the foreign investors, including the supranational bodies who would like to set up their offices in Sri Lanka to manage not only Sri Lanka's transactions, but regional transactions, would not think of come here until we improve our features that are including the infrastructure and the transport systems, and particularly the judicial system, the courts, where enforcing a legal contract is supposed to be extremely difficult in Sri Lanka. Out of about 185 countries in the world, Sri Lanka is ranked 165. So more towards the tail end. So Sri Lanka has to prop up more, arrange more efficiency in the legal system, the court system, in expediting matters with regard to the law enforcement in the country. So this slide also we discussed. These two we discussed. We learned about the authorized exchange dealers yesterday, and the clients, companies, governments, enterprises, financial institutions, importers, exporters, and inward remittances, worker remittances, plus the fund managers. The next slide presentation, we'll discuss more on that. However, the most important category in the financial market are the clients, the customers who would want to buy or sell or foreign exchange requirements in various volumes, and the so-called authorized dealers, the central bank, and the money brokers, supported by the information providers, has to create liquidity or make available bids and offers for each currency in foreign exchange at any given point in time when one of the clients need to cover their exchange positions. Plus, the availability of derivative instruments. The only derivative instrument that we can boast of is the forward exchange contract. Other than that, we cannot boast of any option or futures or any hybrid derivative product, interest rate swaps, such financial products are not available for this group of clients who want to cover their risks. So therefore, Sri Lanka, the Colombo financial market has to improve a great deal by way of introducing derivative products. The next item is that other intermediary like the Colombo Stock Exchange has to come up to serve the needs of arrange the trades, buying, selling the trades on a very organized manner, in a professional manner. So other than the Colombo Stock Exchange for company shares, we do not have such arrangement of stock exchanges or any exchange. Organized exchanges are not available in Sri Lanka. Thanks to the COVID pandemic, the Colombo Tea auctions were arranged online, or digitalization of auctioning of Colombo tea up until the COVID arrived. Colombo tea auctions were manually handled, and that which was a deterrent to participation by various tea buyers and sellers around the globe. So likewise, there can be other exchanges like a debt exchange. Debt instruments could be bought and sold in an exchange like Colombo Stock Exchange. Colombo Stock Exchange is only for equity products, but debt exchange, we are not organized so far. Then we can also organize derivative exchange. Options, currency options, and various other commodity or other financial instruments options market, like options on treasury bills, options on treasury bonds, put options, call options. They could have been traded in an exchange if there was an organized exchange in our country. So there is a great deal for the regulators, the policymakers, or the political authorities, or the governments to handle. Equally, the financial market practitioners like yourselves, money brokers, the bankers, dealers, has to come out with proposals, has to come out with encouragement and the requirements thrown at the central bank and the monetary board and the government, Minister of Finance, that we need such so-called arrangements to trade our products. New instruments are needed. So that kind of vigor has to happen. Then if that kind of arrangements take place, we can think of a development of the Colombo financial markets as a regional market. This side also we discussed yesterday, just to introduce yourselves to the bid and offer of exchange rates, sell, buy, and market maker. Yeah, market maker buys and sells, and market takers sell, buy, because market taker has to sell at the market maker's bid. Market taker has to buy at the market taker's selling price. So I will not spend much time on this because we explained it yesterday, and then you all are very familiar with this type of transactions. And the concept of direct quotes and indirect quotes, foreign currency and the home currency. And most of the currencies in the world are on direct quote, where they express the value of value of a unit of foreign currency in terms of home currency. But there are very few currencies like Australian dollar, sterling pounds, New Zealand dollar, and euro. They practice indirect quote, where they express the unit value of a unit of home currency in terms of foreign currency. And we try to convert between a direct quote and indirect quote, to convert between a direct quote and indirect quote, technique of reversing a quotation or transposing rate. Basically, you 1 divided by the rate, you arrive at the indirect quote, you can convert it to a direct quote. So I hope some of you may have practiced arithmetically the example that I gave you and other rates that you see in the market. So this practice is very useful when it is necessary for us to convert a pair of actively traded currency exchange rates and to find out a value of a currency which is not actively traded, like Sri Lankan rupee. We have to go through the actively traded currency pairs and find the value of foreign currency and arrive at the not so frequently quoted currency values using common currency like US dollar. For example, we discussed this yesterday. For your benefit, I just drew these diagonal arrows for you to be reminded that when the bid, which is usually a low value compared to the offer, when we use a bid to divide the value of other currency, the answer you get is a smaller number compared to when you divide the currency value on the offer side, which is a higher number, where you get a higher value. So please practice this as well at your leisure time, and then equip yourself with number crunching or using a calculator, because in normal circumstances in the banks and maybe in your broking firms, you may be using computer programs, do ready calculations. You just have to click a button or type in exchange rate, you get the value of the next currency. But the difficulty in understanding is that you will not know how that exchange rate calculation was done unless you do it yourself, the calculation, and you go through the formula. So knowledge of using a formula and then the practical calculation gives you a better understanding, and that helps you to do a quicker transaction as well as a profitable transaction, because there's some certain changes that occur in the market. The result would be understood. The result could be understood only if you know this mechanism of formula using and the numbers being used to divide, multiply, or subtract. This is a good example to capture a memory. This example says $1 US equals Japanese yen 104.10, 104.20 bid and offer. And $1 US equals LKR 185.50 and 185.60 bid and offer. Find the bid and offer rate of the Japanese yen in Sri Lankan rupee. So the unit currency is going to be Japanese yen. So the Japanese yen value has to come to a denominator. So when you pick the bid side of US dollar LKR 185.50, you have to use the remember the diagonal rule. I drew some arrows. 185.50 to be divided by 104.20, not 104.10, because then only you get a lower value of the bid price, 104.10, which gives us a result of 1.7802. Then when you find the offer price, 185.60 has to be divided by 104.10, bid side, lower value. So as a result, you will get a higher answer, which is 178.29. So one Japanese yen will be equivalent to LKR 1.7802 bid and 1.7829 offer. You can just use your calculator and then do the calculations and see for your joy, and then also to learn more in this sphere. So how how those banks or authorized dealers calculate their rates for customers? They first look at their status of realized foreign exchange or foreign currency status or unrealized status. Because realized foreign currency does not involve interest calculation. When the foreign currency value is received to your account, that is in your account. But there are the other incidents where the customers come and say, I will get so much money in 1 month's time, 14 days time. So until you get the money, you will not earn interest for those currencies. You cannot earn interest on those currencies because the time taken to reach or to be credited to your account is the interest cost. So realized foreign currency, like the telecredit transfer TTs received, the work remittances received to the account of the bank, 1 USD equals LKR market rate if it is 185.50 and 185.60. On the bid side, work remittances or TTs received to account, you could only take a small margin. So that margin has to be reduced. 185.50 minus 50 cents margin, customer rate is 185 rupees. A very simple calculation. But on the selling side, if someone wants to remit money outside, they will want to buy this dollar from the bank. So bank selling rate is 185.60 and the bank's margin is 50 cents. And the customer will give you rupees. So therefore again, realized fund. So, but the margin has to be added on because you are selling. Buy low, sell high. Always buy low, sell high. If you try to sell low, buy high, you end up at a loss. So your P&L will be at a loss. To avoid that, on the selling rate, margins should be added. So 186.10 selling rate. And this can be used for imports as well. Imports where customer pay you rupees and they want to buy dollars or any other foreign currency. And those rates are then sold out. The foreign currency sold out at those rates. So we'll come to unrealized foreign currency market. Can you give me an example for unrealized foreign currency market? Anybody can give an example, a transaction? Export proceeds received. Customer will come and give you documents received from the port, bill of lading, the performer invoice or commercial invoice, and the shipping documents, proof of the goods being loaded to the ship at the port or the airport to the plane, airway bill. And then these documents has to be sent to the buyer's country, to the buyer's bank, and then the buyer's bank has to show the documents to the buyer in that importer's country, and then only the buyer's bank will be authorized to remit the money to this bank, which is the exporter's bank. So there's a time lag. Shall we say 14 days? Or it takes sometimes 1 month, 21 days. So market rate is 185.50. Bank takes its margin 50 cents, reduced, subtract. Then the interest cost, shall we say 14 days, interest cost is 1 rupee per dollar. So then customer rate is 184. For each dollar that is received as export proceeds, customer will be given only 184 rupees. This 1 rupee goes to the interest income of the bank books. 50 cents goes to the exchange income of the bank's books. Right? So then unrealized funds on the selling side, basically selling side, the selling rate 185.60, margin is added, as I told you, buy low, sell high. Then interest cost on the selling side, very seldom that you get interest additions where customer supply the rupee or sell the rupee to the bank and then buy the dollar or foreign currency. Supposing if the customer has to arrange a temporary overdraft or any other permanent overdraft or obtain a loan, which might take about 2 weeks, 1 week, 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, or 1 month, then on the case-by-case basis for that number of days, we can apply, we can compute the interest rate per dollar and then add that also to this rate if there's such transaction taking place. So you see the difference, the spread between the bid and offer widens because the margins taken by the bank, which is going to be a legitimate profit, exchange profit of the bank, and the legitimate interest cost for use of funds of the bank. So finally, the customer rates are circulated to or input to the computers, which can be accessible to any branch of the bank and any corner of the country to be used for such customers. The forward exchange rates, I think I explained very well yesterday. Anybody needs to be explained today? Any question on forward exchange rates? The premium or discount or the forward points, swap points? Understood? How it is derived from the interest rate differential? No response from anyone. Do you have any question on the forward exchange rates?
No, sir.
No, sir. Understood, sir.
Very good, very good, very good. So we shall, and this transaction exposure, translation exposure, I think is very simple to understand. Then hedging also we discussed. And then factors affecting exchange rates or determination through the demand and supply. We discussed yesterday, and then today we also discussed few things like governance, policy decisions, stability of political arena, peace prevalent, then infrastructure, transportation, all that will add to the number of factors determining the foreign exchange rates. It reminds me a good story. Somewhere in the 1997 and 98, you would have heard there was an East Asian currency turmoil happening in the Indonesia, Philippines, and those few countries in that Asian region. The key features of that was those countries wanted to release the exchange control regulations far quicker, and their ability to attract foreign exchange and also like communication facilities and then trading in exchanges and a few other accommodation of large sums of foreign currency into their markets was not so well managed, and then plus the legal and law enforcement matters were not so streamlined in 1997-98, that era. Then with the opening of the markets, deregulation, exchange controls being released, big investors around the world like George Soros and the funds went in and bought those assets using their huge funds. And of course, when they come into a market, they will have a target profit to earn, and then they will exit. So it happens so that a few months' time, they were receiving a huge amount of investments into the stock market and various other exchanges, derivatives newly introduced. Finally, when those investors, big-time investors around the globe, wanted to take profit, they exited within the double quick time. Then they came in and they took their money out. So what happened was, in those countries, the wealth that was available was not sometimes adequate to send the guys back, the investments back to their respective countries. And as a result, they lost huge values in the national wealth. So the learning point out of that is those big-time investors in every day to day, they invest in markets like New York, London, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and in those big markets, those markets have the infrastructure to accommodate their need. Whenever they want to switch the funds from one market to the other market, they do daily, on a daily basis, day-to-day transactions. So when they shift the funds, those big-time markets are able to accommodate those transactions. But these newly emerging countries, Philippines, Indonesia, and those few countries, could not bear up. So that was the learning point. And that is a good learning point even to Sri Lanka. Now, even when we are about to finalize the rules, regulations, policies of the Colombo Port City, it will be a very big input of facts to learn the East Asian currency turmoil and then how it contributed and what was the impact on those countries and how they manage themselves thereafter. Okay. So now I thought of introducing you to little current rates, and then also finally coming up with about 5 multiple choice questions that you would see normally in the exam paper. So let's see. On the 26th of November 2020, these were the rates prevailing. I chose 6 currencies, the rupee values on the 26th of November. Remember, the US dollar value was about 184 rupees at that time in November. And on the 27th, the value was slightly different for the same currencies, like this. The policy rates announced by the central bank policy rate on the 26th of November was standing deposit facility rate was 4.5% and standing lending facility rate was 5.5%. What is the use of these two rates? Deposit facility rate enables the market participants, the licensed commercial banks and the primary dealers to invest their excess funds at the end of the day with the central bank at 4.5% overnight. And those banks and primary dealers who are short of liquidity at the end of the day could borrow from central bank at the lending facility, standing lending facility rate at 5.5% to repay on the next day, overnight. So that is the more or less the open market operation window by the central bank to accommodate either the excess liquidity in the system at 4.5% or if there is a shortfall to lend at 5.5%. So this is a corridor of opportunity for the financial intermediaries, licensed commercial banks and primary dealers who maintain their accounts with the central bank to cover their liquidity position. And the bank rate is 8.5%. What do you mean by bank rate? Does anybody know about bank rate? The bank rate is the rate at which central bank would fund any bank at a liquidity crisis or at a difficulty. Can you remember a recent time incident like that? Do you recall Ceylon Bank's plight with the Golden Key incidents? The group companies were intercompany lending between the Selinco Group. Ceylon Bank, as a commercial bank, was at a difficulty, although the Ceylon Bank was functioning very efficiently. Because of intercompany lending and borrowing, it could not manage their liquidity at that time, and most of the banks who had limit to Ceylon Bank also withdrew their limits because of the exposure to other companies of Ceylon Bank, Selinco Group, and they needed support. So to manage the liquidity center, Ceylon Bank tried hard to borrow money from the friendly banks in the market, but they could not most of the time. But they succeeded to a little extent, but they could not do it fully. So central bank, once they were informed of the situation, they first started lending to them at 8.5% bank rate. And the repercussions or the irony of using this rate is also grave. Central bank will immediately step into the management, or they will remove the board of directors and the senior management, and they will step into the management and correct any policy deficiency. And if you recall, the management of Ceylon Bank was handed over to the Bank of Ceylon for a few months' time after funding at 8.5%. Of course, the rate at that time was a little higher, about 14%, I guess, bank rate. But now the bank rate has come down to 8.5%. So Other than an incident like that, the bank rate is just a nominal rate, just for indication purposes. And what is SRR? Statutory reserve requirement of 2%. All the deposit liabilities, all the customer funds in a banking institution, 2% has to be kept at the central bank account untouched. And the central bank does not pay interest to the bank for the amount of 2% of the customer funds. Example, if one bank has 100 million deposits, customers deposits, 2 million has to be kept at the central bank account, and then that particular bank will not be paid interest for that 2 million. The bank has to survive the 100 million deposits. Bank has to pay interest to the 100 million, but only 98 million will be available to that particular bank to earn interest by lending to the customers or lending to other banks or investment in treasury bills, treasury bonds, or buying any other assets. They could earn only from 98 million, but has to pay interest on the entire 100 million to the customer. So that is, there is an opportunity cost of what are the interest rate divided by 2% into the market rate. There is going to be something like 0.2, 0.25% interest cost by keeping 2% SRR at the central bank. What is the purpose of SRR? Statutory reserve requirement purpose. Some say it is a deposit insurance. Insurance for depositors' money on that particular bank. Can be, but actually is not that. Actual purpose is to limit the ability to create money. Have you heard that bankers create money using the customer deposits? You heard? Those who have learned economics at the university level or the advanced level sometimes may have learned 100 rupee deposited at the bank by a customer has the passbook or the statement or whatever showing that 100 rupees available at this bank account. But for the bank, it is a liability of 100 rupees. The bank could use that to lend to another customer and earn interest. When lending to another customer, bank has to only worry about the first customer who deposited the money coming back and asking for the money or withdrawal, asking the money to be withdrawn. For that, certain percentage out of the total deposit is normally kept as vault cash, something like 3%, going by the experience of the banker. The situation will not be rosy if the banker does not maintain good reputation in the market. If the market reputation of the bank is good, compliance level is good, then the customers, the possibility or probability of the customer coming and asking or withdrawing the money is very less, unless the customer needs the money for emergency purposes. So bankers, by practice, they know that only about 3% they need the customers come and withdraw money out of the total deposits. There are millions of customers. Out of the total deposits, only about 3% is usually withdrawn. That is also because ATM cards and the debit cards and credit cards being issued to the customer. unlike those days when the plastic cards were not available, not implemented, and the ATM machines were not implemented, customers used to withdraw money for a certain period, or when they want to go on a trip or to do a trade, they withdrew money from the bank counters and then had it in their person pocket or to do a transaction. Now, with the availability of debit card, ATM card, and the credit card, customers deposit the money in the bank and travel to various destinations, use those ATM card or debit card or credit card as only for the requirement. And that is also good for their safety of the money. So coming back to the earlier example, if one customer comes and deposits 100 rupees at a bank, Bank A, and the Bank A could lend to another customer the 100 rupees at a rate of interest. And this can go on infinite time until the customer or the first customer comes and withdraws. So it's money, that 100 rupees deposited by the first customer can create transactions, multiple transactions of 100 rupees on a given period of time, infinite time. But when there is a statutory reserve requirement imposed by the central bank, the 100 rupees deposited by the first customer, then the bank would lend only 98 rupees out to the next customer. And even if we presume that the customer number 2 comes and deposit 98 rupees again in the bank, borrowed money 98 rupees, then the bank would lend only 96 rupees. 2% has to be kept at the reserve to the next customer, customer number 3. So likewise, the bank would also go on a lending spree to 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 customers. And each time 2 rupees has to be kept at the central bank. But it's only 100 rupees first transaction. So the purpose of the SRR is to limit the creation of money. Remember the original situation, 100 rupees was lent to several customers. Infinite time they could go on lending. But when the SRR is introduced, every time 2% is less. So there is a decided, it's not infinite, this is only a decided number. You can do a simulation and see on a computer Excel spreadsheet. When there is a 10% SRR, the bank could lend only 9 times. In others, 900 times. Less than 900 times. 100 rupees deposited, 10% SRR, meaning bank would lend on 90 rupees. And next, that customer comes and deposit 90 rupees at the bank, then the bank would lend to the third customer only 89 rupees, only 81 rupees. So like that, only 9 times it could go. So the purpose of SRR is to decrease the money supply in the system. Now, decreasing money supply in the economic terms, economics study, how does it affect the economic development of the country? When the money supply is not controlled infinite time, when there is no SRR, economy develops infinite times. Economic activities can take place many occasions, many times. But when there is 10% SRR, only 9 times the economic activity could take place. So there is a curtailment of economic activity. When there is 2% SRR, maybe about 40 times the transaction could take place. So there's a limitation of money supply. And why limiting money supply? To curtail the economic development. To curtail, you can say, also to curtail inflation, curtail economic development. So, in theory, having SRR is a deterrent to economic development, in theory. So, why have SRR? The next question. So, that's going to be a little deeper economics. If you want to follow a degree or a master's degree or a PhD, you can research more on SRR, impact of SRR on economy. But for the moment, for this purpose of this exam, this much of knowledge is adequate. Okay, starting sample MCQs. MCQ number 1, sample. You have 10,000 US dollars and you want to sell that for rupees on the 27th of November 2020. How many LKR you would have bought? The rates are given on the 27th here. The rates are given here. What is the rate you are going to use? USD LKR, right? And USD LKR, you are going to be a customer of a bank. So bank codes are this. What is the rate you are going to use? Bid or offer?
Bid.
Sorry?
The bid, sir.
Bid 183.02.
02.
So, yeah, what is the answer?
Answer B.
Answer B. Anybody says any other option? Any other answer? Nobody has any other answer? Oh, good. Very good. So answer is B. Next question. We introduce you to rates of 26 November and 27 November reproduced here. Tell me whether rupee has appreciated on the 27th compared to 26, or whether rupee has depreciated on the 27th compared to 26, or rupee has remained stable on the 27th compared to 26, or cannot describe whether LKR improved or not on the 27, 20, compared to 26. What is your answer?
A. Rupee has appreciated, sir.
Why do you say that?
Because the bid and offer, the rupee has got strong.
Rupee has got numerically lower number, meaning rupee has got strong. Against USD, it is the same. Against GBP, it is the same. Against JPY, it is the same. Is it? No, JPY, on the offer side, rupee is appreciated, right? On the bid side, rupee has depreciated. Basically, the bid and offer spread had narrowed. Euro, rupee has lower number, appreciated. Canadian dollar, rupee has appreciated. Australian dollars, rupee has appreciated. So answer A. Everybody agrees? Anybody has a different answer?
No, sir. A.
Good, very good. Okay, now this is going to be a little tougher question. Again, the 26th and 27th November rates given. Calculate the value of one Aussie dollar in terms of USD. Now, your knowledge of what I explained just a while ago had to be used. You have, in other words, I'm asking you to calculate the value of the Aussie dollar in USD. But you are given here USD value in rupees, USD value in Aussie dollars, AUD value in rupees. Can you do it for the 27th? AUD1 equals USD how much? How to do it? I know it's a tough question, but guys like you who are dealing with currency exchange rates on a daily basis, it shouldn't be a big problem. First, you have to for number A.
All of the above.
Sorry.
I think the answer is D, sir.
D for David.
Yes, all of the above.
Oh. How did you, can you explain for the benefit of others as well, please?
So on the 27th,
Yes.
to get the AUD USD rate,
Yes.
the bid side, I divided 133.25 from 187.24.
You get the answer of 0.7117.
Yes.
Right. Okay, then.
So
Then you divide 139.40 by 183.02.
You get the answer of 0.7617.
Yes, sir.
Right. Very good. Very good. So can you do the same thing on the 26th values, please?
I did the same thing, sir.
So what did you do? 133.67 divided by 197.78.
Divided by 187.7. Yeah.
And it is
0.7118, so it's 0.7118.
Good. And the other answer, 139.93 divided by 183.58.
Yeah.
0.7622.
Yes.
Good. And has the AUD depreciated from 26 to 27?
Yes, sir.
Why do you say that?
Because the amount of rupees you are getting for AUD has reduced, which means the rupee has appreciated and AUD has depreciated.
Right. So all three are correct, no?
Yes, sir.
All right. Very good. Superb. So did everybody understand that logic? Please ask questions. Please ask questions. No? Magnificent. Everybody has understood. Okay. What is the main role of back office staff? A, B, or C, or D? No answer?
D, sir.
answer D.
D for David, is it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Anybody have a different answer? Answer D is correct. Answer D is correct. Anything difficult to understand here? No. No. Working closely with the traders or front office is normally they do, but they are the premises are out of bound for each other, isn't it? And there is no business for the back office staff to inform central bank for any limit violation. It is, they have to safeguard their own side, isn't it? Okay. Last question. Barings crisis highlighted the critical importance of which operational risk management practice. Do you know what is Baring crisis is? Have you learned? There's a bank called Barings Brothers, a centuries-old bank in UK. And this particular bank was also maintaining bank accounts of the royal family in UK, and it was centuries old. And they hired a guy called Nick Leeson. They hired a guy called a young fellow called Nick Leeson, and because he was very smart and then also very handsome looking and very smart in transactions, he was selected to, after serving various branches, he was selected to the treasury and finally ended up in the front office. He did a lot of transactions and made a lot of money for the bank because he is smart. He was quickly elevated to senior grades, and finally he ended up being transferred to the Barings Brothers branch in Singapore as the head of operations, like general manager or the CEO. Being the CEO, but he had the knack of dealing at the front office at the head office. He wanted to engage himself in dealing. Usually CEOs doesn't get involved, isn't it? In banks particularly. So this guy started trading in options and futures and then currency trading and sort of things. Being the CEO of the Singapore office of Barings Bank. Singapore market had been a little different to the UK market where he had experience. So, but he had resorted to be big in his deals. So the entire Singapore market knew of this guy once he entered because of a large volume of transactions. And he dealt, being the CEO, he dealt maybe the first few transactions, for a few months or something, he would have earned money. And then he would have also been paid handsome bonuses where he was owning luxury boats and luxury cars and apartments and sort of things bought under the bonus, with the bonus money. So then a time came where few transactions where he had to pay margin deposits for option transactions, future transactions, margin deposits has to be paid. So some of the transactions involving Japanese yen was not profitable, and therefore Barings Brothers Singapore branch bank had to pay margin to the brokers on the exchange. Finally, this guy, finally at the same time, an earthquake happened in Kobe in Japan. So therefore Japanese yen crashed. And that made this guy's positions worse. Then he pleaded with the head office to send money to be paid for these margin deposits. Because when the position goes against big time, each time revaluation happens, margin has to be increased. So finally, he never divulged the fact that he was dealing in the Singapore market by himself, being the CEO. And he forced the back office guys as well to hide the transaction in fictitious accounts called 88888 something. So those positions were hidden. Auditors also couldn't locate it, But the entire Singapore market knew that this guy is running unprofitable positions. Head office auditors also couldn't locate it, although they came and audited their books. Finally, there were a date that this entire thing came to light, and Nick Leeson got into one of the luxury boat and disappeared in the seas. And maybe he would have boarded a plane somewhere in Malaysia or somewhere else, and were going back to UK through Frankfurt. And at the Frankfurt airport, he was arrested. And now he serves a jail sentence. His wife and them family broke, and now he is in a disarray. So the risk, the learning points for the treasury markets and financial markets is that segregation of front office, middle office, and back office has to be very effective. Front office guys cannot middle office or back office. Back office guys cannot middle office or front office. So these are the management practice that risk management practice that was not available at the Barings Bank in Singapore. Being the CEO, he was in the front office, and then he influenced the back office to hide the deals. And even the middle office guys were kept under pressure not to highlight the risk. So the correct answer is C. There are a lot of articles about this guy, Nick Leeson. You can type his name on the Google search and then read about him. All right. So time is all up. So tomorrow we will discuss the banker's point of view of the financial markets. And as I informed you all yesterday, there will be an exam, and then most likely first week of May, where you have to be at the Institute of Bankers for as short as 1 hour, 1.5 hours, and answer a set of multiple choice questions like this, and submit your answer scripts and go home. It will be on a Saturday morning or Sunday morning. I have to agree with the Institute of Bankers, the time and the date. All right. Any questions?
No, sir.
Good.
No, sir.
Very good. Very good. Okay, then let's meet tomorrow at 4:30.